Simon Reynolds, one of pop culture's most articulate critics and theorists. Simon, how has the internet changed the music business?
It's just been cataclysmic, hasn't it? In mostly negative ways, but it's like it has positive aspects as well. I mean,
well, let's start with the negative.
Well, obviously, it's been really bad for record labels. It's been pretty bad for artists. I mean, some artists have made it work for them, but a lot.
Not everyone would agree with that. Why has it been bad for artists?
Well, it's much less likely that you'll be able to make a living doing it, I think. And a lot of, certainly the reduction in record sales has made the, it's always like a lottery. Like most musicians never make any money. Most of them leave their deals in debt, notional debt, because the record companies don't come and repossess your belongings. But it's like you're in the red, and if your record happened to sell a lot later, the money you'd be earning would be going to pay off this debt that you'd built up through recording costs and touring costs and all this kind of stuff. But there was always the possibility that a tiny fraction of musicians just really hit the big time and just made forever, and that's gone down. That prospect has reduced a lot, I think. There are other ways of making money.
Why? Is it because of piracy? Is it because of the collapse of the industry?
Because a generation has come along who don't think they should pay for music,
What's your reading on that? You're obviously someone who spends an awful lot of time with artists and with audiences. You're someone who I assume mostly pays for your music. Why are so many people not interested or willing to pay for their music anymore?
It's just it's irresistible, isn't it? I think, and in fact, I have downloaded records in a naughty way, and it's just there's something about the fact that it's so easy to do. I have actually downloaded records I already own because it's more convenient than trying to find the CD in my collection. So I'll actually, rather than waste 20 minutes digging through my boxes for the CD, I'll just download it. It's just all up there. And for me, mostly the interest is things that are out of print and esoteric, that you'd never dream of ever hearing. But I think the thing that I find, though, is that kind of left-wing people often have this thing of rubbing, because you're reflexively anti-capitalist. Often rock critics are. They think they should rejoice that the record companies are suffering. It's great. The corporations are suffering after having prospered off the back of musicians for so long. But I think the decommodification of music has actually not been very good for fans either. I think there's something about paying for music that makes it it's more intense. You're going to listen harder to music. If you pay for it, you're going to pay attention to a record you bought, get your money's worth. Whereas I think people who download a lot, I've just seen from my own habits, you listen distractedly, you might never get round to playing it, you might listen to half of it and stop and get distracted by checking your emails or something else, downloading more music. So I think there's something about the loss of the buying music relationship that has disintensified.
In your excellent book, Retromania, you talk about something called the crisis of over-documentation. There's this abundance. We've arrived in the promised land, but it's a rather dark place.
It is like the promised land. It's sort of the world you always dreamt of if you were a music fan.
Cornucopia, absolute abundance.
Or even a fan of any art form, film or design or whatever. It's all up there. All the information, all the most obscure images and movies that you could never hope to see normally. You can access it all, but it's too much to process. It's too much to feel, really. I find that I'm trying to keep up with so much music and listen to so much music from the past that it doesn't quite. It's hard to emotionally react to it. You're just processing it, ticking off boxes. Oh, I must check out this genre from the late 70s or whatever, and it becomes a different relationship. I think also having so much knowledge about music takes away some of the mystery as well, like some of the...
Well, you're calling in your book for a return to boredom. You said that we are super saturated now with with information, with data, with music, and we need to go back to a world where we're more easily bored.
Well, I don't know if I actually, it's like a manifesto or a call for boredom, but it was more like a musing, where I had this funny thing where I suddenly started remembering what it was like to be a teenager, growing up in a small town in England, and being starved for stimulation. And the result of that, you tended to deal with it by daydreaming and fantasy or mischief, you know, like vandalism and pranks and things like that, or just making your own entertainment. And there's a different kind of boredom now that I think comes from having so many choices and so many options that you find yourself just, you know, I mean, one thing is mindlessly flicking through the TV with your remote, just through the hundreds and thousands of channels, or drifting restlessly across the internet, never quite fully, you know, starting to read things and then getting bored. The ultimate
Nicholas Carr, Jerome Lanier thing. So are you in Lanier's camp when he argues that he seems to blame the internet for the disappearance of original music?
I think it's had something to do, you know, I think that's at least a partially correct intuition or observation by him, and I thought his book was really interesting. I think having all this stuff available to young bands, it makes it so tempting to sort of work by revisiting a style and tinkering with it a bit. I think like in the old days, like bands tend to have like start with a few primary influences, and it was a different sort of model of creativity. Like you kind of struggled with your influences and you overcame them, and then you know, if you look at what the Rolling Stones did, like they struggled with, you know, they were super inspired by Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and Robert Johnson, and they kind of had to really search for the records. It's hard to find them, and they start out quite imitative, and then they basically go off on their own original track.
So what you're saying then is that the remix culture might be a cultural cul-de-sac?
Yeah, I don't think it's, you know, like particularly mashups seem to me a very sterile genre. Like, you know, and also they're not, you know, a mashup is not something that you'd really want to listen to more than a few times, because it's like a joke, isn't it? Really, it's like a wisecrack. You have the juxtaposition of unlikely things, you know, like Salt and Pepper, like a rap artist combined with the Stooges, like a punk hard rock. That's a funny combination. It's incongruous, but you wouldn't necessarily. You'd probably want to go off and listen to Salt and Pepper on their own and the Stooges on their own. You know, mashups don't have a very long shelf life, I don't think, and they're not adding anything. They're not a contribution to the future of music, I don't think.
Well, you're not allowed to be on TechCrunch and be too miserable.
Right.
So let's end on a cheerful note. You said that the internet has had some positive impacts on music. Are you encouraged by Spotify and these new models that seem to be more viable business models for enabling audiences to access music and realizing some revenue at least for the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think anything that sort of, you know, I think a lot of people probably would like, you know, they like the idea of the artist making a living, I think, you know, and
well, who doesn't? I mean,
yeah,
because
you know, you don't want people to have to suffer for their art necessarily, but I think, you know, there are definitely positive aspects to having all this knowledge. The interesting thing is that you're getting the rise of filtration systems, aren't you? You have such an abundance of knowledge and data and cultural stuff. So that requires things like Spotify or aggregation sites. Like one I visit a lot is called the Daily Swarm, that picks music-related stories, and it's very useful because you know the whole concept of the name, I only just realised, is the swarm of data, but we're going to navigate paths for you. So that role is very important.
Do you think that's where the business opportunities in the future of music lie, with curators? You talk in some detail about curation in your book. Do you still think that we're on the verge of reinventing a new kind of curated media online?
I don't know about that, but I do think that more and more people, you know, most people don't have time to sift through everything. There's too much to go through. So in terms of like what I do, I mean, that role of being a filter seems to be one viable future for the critic, and suggest that there's some kind of future for the profession. I think just generally anything that sort of makes it manageable, anything that sort of directs people to the good stuff, is going to be
so nothing
rewarded.
really has changed. We're still really at the beginning of this thing. We're still trying to figure out how to make this data valuable for the consumer, and we still haven't figured it out.
No, I mean it's just there is a sort of there is a problem of overabundance and of plenty can be.
So the good news then is for the entrepreneur out there who loves music, who wants to set up an online music business, there are still opportunities.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, basically these things are all these systems are basically variants of what radio used to do in a way. Radio was this famous rock writer Greil Marcus called it like a good weird machine. Like it's a machine that introduces you. It's like radio gives you what you already like, but every so often it shows you something you don't know that you like. That's the secret, is to get people to encounter things that they're not already looking for and surprise them every so often. So anything that kind of can take on the role that radio used to have and deliver it to new things to people that they're going to like is going to prosper, I think.
And on that serendipitous note, Simon, I want to thank you so much for appearing on TechCrunch TV.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it.